It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
When Emily told me she wanted an open relationship, I remember thinking the world had tilted just a little. The air in the room changed. Not violently, not suddenly, but like a slow shift in gravity that made everything around me feel slightly off balance. We were sitting in our living room, surrounded by the quiet domestic comfort we had spent years building together, the muted tones of our walls, the faint scent of the vanilla candles she loved, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. There was a throw blanket across her lap, the one her mother had knitted for us as an engagement gift. And yet the atmosphere between us felt anything but warm. She was playing absently with the edge of her coffee cup, eyes darting everywhere except toward mine. I could sense the tension in her hands, the subtle tremor of someone who has rehearsed their words far too many times and is terrified of saying them out loud. When the words finally came, "I think we should try an open relationship, or maybe we shouldn't get married at all," they landed softly, almost gently. But the impact was brutal. It felt like being punched through a pillow, muffled but devastating all the same. For a few seconds, I simply stared at her. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. My mind refused to process the sentence in front of me. Open relationship, now? After everything we had planned, after months of tasting cake samples, signing venue contracts, sending invitations, it didn't make sense. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. "What do you mean, open relationship?" Emily exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. "I mean, we love each other, right? But I feel like we're missing something. Like I haven't really had time to explore who I am. Before we get married, I need to know what else is out there. I need more freedom." The words freedom and marriage don't usually belong in the same sentence, and yet she said it so earnestly, so quietly, as if she were confessing some secret desire that had been eating at her. And here's the strange part. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her of betrayal or cry or demand explanations. I just sat there, numb, feeling the faintest trace of disbelief that somehow didn't turn into anger. I think part of me wanted to see what she would say next, whether there was some hidden reason, a misunderstanding, some way to twist the meaning of her words so that they wouldn't hurt as much. But no, she continued, "I've been thinking a lot about this, about us. I don't want to hurt you, but I can't ignore what I feel. I think if we open things up just for a while, we might come out stronger. It's funny how people say, 'I don't want to hurt you,' right before doing something they know will break you." I remember nodding slowly, my body acting on autopilot while my brain scrambled for some logical footing. I could feel the pulse in my neck, heavy and irregular. The room seemed to shrink around me, like all the oxygen had been quietly replaced by confusion. And then, out of nowhere, I heard myself say, "Okay." Her head snapped up, startled. "Okay, what?" "Okay," I repeated. "Let's do it." For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely lost. It was as though she had spent hours preparing for a storm, and instead, the sky cleared. I thought you'd be angry," she murmured. "Oh, I am," I said softly. "Just not in the way you think. You said you needed this, so let's see what happens." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Maybe she'd expected a fight. Maybe she wanted one. But now she was adrift. The control she thought she had was slipping. After a few seconds of silence, she said, "We'll have to talk about boundaries." "Of course," I replied. "Tomorrow. I need some air." When I stepped outside, the night felt colder than it should have been. The air had that crisp autumn edge, sharp enough to sting the lungs. I walked aimlessly for hours, letting the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. I wasn't even angry at that point, just hollow. It was like my emotions were standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for permission to jump. By the time I came home, Emily was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I could hear her breathing, too steady, too deliberate. I stood there in the doorway for a long minute, just watching her. She looked peaceful, fragile even, the way she used to when we first moved in together. It almost made me question whether the conversation had really happened, or if it was just some surreal dream I'd wake up from. But the next morning proved it wasn't a dream. Over breakfast, she brought up the rules. She was suddenly calm, clinical, like she'd compartmentalized everything overnight. "I think we should be honest about who we're seeing," she said, sipping her coffee. "And always use protection, obviously. No emotional attachment, no sleepovers, and if it ever feels wrong, we stop. I nodded along as if I agreed with every word. But inside, something cold and deliberate was taking shape. You see, there's a certain kind of pain that turns into clarity. If Emily wanted to explore, if she wanted to see what else was out there, then fine. But she wasn't the only one who could play that game. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was something quieter, sharper, a need to understand just how far her idea of freedom could stretch before it snapped. Over the years, Emily had mentioned her friends in passing, harmless stories that now replayed in my mind with new meaning. She told me that Tessa once joked about me having the best shoulders, that Rachel said I seemed like the type who would make a great husband, and that Hannah, her oldest friend, thought I was too good to be true. At the time, they were just offhand comments. But now, they became something else, a list of names that represented opportunity. So that evening, as Emily sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I opened mine and sent 3 messages to Tessa. Hey, random question. Would you want to grab a drink Friday night? Emily and I are trying something new and she's cool with it. To Rachel. Hey Rachel, how's work? Emily mentioned you might be free this weekend. Want to grab dinner? And to Hannah. Hey stranger, it's been a while. Just so you know, Emily and I are experimenting with an open relationship. Want to catch up sometime next week? It felt almost mechanical, typing those messages. I wasn't nervous, just curious, Tessa replied first. Wait, seriously? Emily's okay with that? Followed by, yeah, sure, why not? Rachel took longer, about an hour, but her answer was a quiet, dinner sounds interesting. And Hannah, predictably, didn't text back. She called. When I answered, she said, please tell me this is a joke. Not a joke, I replied. Her idea, not mine. There was silence on the line, then a low laugh. Oh, Emily's lost her damn mind. You're actually going along with it? I told her I'd support her, I said evenly. Just keeping my word. Hannah exhaled through a chuckle. You're either insane or brilliant. Fine, call me next week. Let's see where this goes. When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. 3 messages, 3 responses. 3 doors opening into a world I never thought I'd walk into. And strangely, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't even feel satisfaction. Just a calm, deliberate kind of acceptance. If this was what Emily wanted, freedom, exploration, excitement, then I'd give her exactly that. Only it wouldn't be the way she imagined. The days leading up to Friday passed in slow motion. Emily acted as though nothing had happened, as if our conversation about opening the relationship had been some fever dream that both of us decided to forget. She smiled at me in the mornings, kissed me goodbye before work, even sent me a picture of her lunch like she used to. But there was something different about her eyes, a shadow behind them. She was pretending. We both were. By Thursday evening, she finally broke the silence. So, she said as she cleared the dinner table, not quite meeting my gaze, are you doing anything this weekend? I could almost hear the crack in her voice beneath the casual tone. Yeah, I said simply. I've got plans Friday and Saturday. She froze for a second, her hand hovering over a plate. Plans? I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. Drinks with Tessa on Friday. Dinner with Rachel Saturday. You remember them? The sound of ceramic hitting the sink echoed a little too loud. My friends? She said quietly, turning toward me, her face pale. Yeah, I replied. They seemed open to it. I thought, since we're trying this whole thing, it made sense to start there. Her mouth opened, but no words came. It was like watching someone try to swim through mud. Panic, disbelief, confusion, all mixing together. You asked out my friends? I did, I said calmly. Was that not part of the deal? Her lips trembled. I didn't think you'd actually... I thought we'd... Thought we'd what, Emily? I asked, leaning forward slightly. Play pretend? She swallowed hard. I just didn't think you'd want to see them. I shrugged. You said we could explore. I'm exploring. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. She turned away, wiping her hands on a towel that suddenly seemed to need too much attention. Fine, she said finally, her voice tight. Do what you want. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Friday night arrived with the kind of nervous energy that reminded me of first dates years ago, that mix of curiosity and control. I dressed simply, nothing fancy, but I noticed I was taking more time with the details. a better shirt, a hint of cologne, the watch Emily had given me for my birthday. Tessa was already at the bar when I arrived. She looked different than I remembered. A little older, a little sharper, but still with that bright, mischievous smile that seemed to light up every room she entered. "Wow," she said as I approached. "I still can't believe this is real." "Me neither," I admitted, sitting across from her. "But here we are." We talked for hours about work, travel, memories from Emily's college years. Tessa was easy to be around. She had that rare ability to make even silence feel comfortable. And yet, beneath it all, there was this unspoken tension, the awareness that what we were doing was something forbidden, something that, no matter how we dressed it up, would cause damage. At one point, she leaned in closer, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "You know, Emily always said you were too perfect. Maybe that's why she wanted this," I smiled faintly. "Ah, maybe. Or maybe she just got bored of perfect." Tessa's laugh was soft, but tinged with sadness. She doesn't know what she's risking. When I got home that night, the apartment lights were still on. Emily was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at the TV. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "How was your date?" she asked, her voice flat. "It was good," I said, taking off my jacket. "We had a nice time. Did you sleep with her?" Her tone was sharp, like the question had been loaded and ready for hours. "No," I said honestly. "We just talked." She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the TV. "Right. The air between us was heavy. That kind of silence where every word you don't say screams louder than the ones you do." I went to bed, leaving her in the living room. For the first time since we'd moved in together, I didn't wait for her to follow. Saturday came too quickly. I almost canceled the dinner with Rachel, not because I felt guilty, but because I was tired. Emotionally drained. But when Rachel texted me, "Still on for tonight?" I found myself typing yes before I could talk myself out of it. She chose a quiet little restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the lights are low and the tables are close enough to make conversation feel intimate. Rachel was already seated when I arrived. Dressed simply but elegantly, her hair pinned back, her expression unreadable. "You actually came," she said when I sat down. "I said I would," I replied. She studied me for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I have to admit, when you texted I thought it was some kind of test." "It's not," I said. "Though maybe it is, in a way." Rachel smiled faintly. "Emily's always been impulsive. I never thought she'd drag you into something like this." "She didn't drag me," I said. I agreed, her eyebrow arched. "Did you?" That question lingered longer than it should have. Dinner went smoothly, almost too smoothly. Rachel was smart, composed, and had this quiet confidence that made you feel like she saw straight through you. For most of the evening, she avoided talking about Emily. When she finally did, it was with a kind of weary honesty. "She told me about the open relationship thing a few days ago," she said, stirring her drink. She seemed off, like she was trying to convince herself it was a good idea. "Yeah," I murmured. "I noticed that too." Rachel looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "Be careful. Whatever she's searching for, she might not find it before she destroys something she can't fix." It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't a warning either. It was more like sympathy, the kind that comes from watching someone else walk into a storm you've seen before. After dinner, we walked outside. The air was cool, the kind of night that made you want to linger. We said goodbye with a polite hug, nothing more. But as I watched her walk away, I realized how empty I felt. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just the slow ache of a man who'd lost something sacred. When I got home, Emily was waiting again. This time, she wasn't pretending to watch TV. "Rachel texted me," she said as soon as I walked through the door. "I figured she might," I said, setting down my keys. "She said you were kind. That you seemed sad." I shrugged. "Maybe I am." Emily stood there, barefoot, her hair pulled back, wearing one of my old shirts. She looked small, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I didn't think it would be like this," she said quietly. I don't know what I thought." I sat down on the couch, exhausted. "What did you think would happen, Emily? That I'd sit around while you explored and waited for you to decide whether I was enough?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to feel something different. I thought maybe if we both did, we'd appreciate what we had more." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You don't strengthen love by breaking it," she flinched, turning away. So what now? That depends on you, I said. Do you still want this? Because I can keep going. I've got coffee with Hannah next week. She spun around, panic flashing in her eyes. No, not her. Please, not Hannah. Why not? I asked. She's single. She knows the situation. Seems fair. Because she's my best friend, Emily whispered. She's been there for me since we were kids. It would ruin everything. I stared at her for a long time, and something inside me finally gave way. Not in anger, but in resignation. You started this, I said softly. You opened the door. You don't get to choose who walks through it. Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I just sat there, numb, realizing that whatever we'd built together had already begun to crumble. That night, we slept in the same bed but on opposite edges, as if the ocean of distance between us had already formed. And in the darkness, I couldn't help but think how fragile love really is. How quickly something so stable can collapse under the weight of one person's restlessness. The week after Rachel's dinner felt like moving through a dream. Everything familiar was suddenly strange, and every small interaction seemed weighted with invisible consequences. I woke up each morning with this low, simmering tension in my chest, the kind that reminds you that nothing will ever feel normal again. Emily acted like she was fine, but I could see through it. Every glance, every half smile, every pause in conversation betrayed the storm brewing inside her. Tuesday evening came, and it was time to meet Hannah. I had texted her earlier in the week. Casual, polite, straightforward. She responded enthusiastically, though there was a hint of curiosity, maybe even caution in her reply. I couldn't blame her. The situation was complicated. But like Rachel and Tessa, Hannah understood the ground rules. This was exploratory, with no hidden agendas, a test of the limits that Emily had set for herself, and, by extension, for us. When I arrived at the cafe, Hannah was already there, sipping tea and looking impossibly composed. She greeted me warmly, but I could sense the wariness. This wasn't a normal meetup. The tension was palpable, yet strangely exhilarating. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversation meandering between work, mutual friends, travel dreams, and subtle digs at the absurdity of Emily's demands. Hannah had a sharp wit, the kind that cuts through pretense and forces honesty. So, she said at one point, you're really going to follow through with this? I am, I said. It's not about enjoying it. It's about respecting the parameters she set. If she wanted monogamy, she shouldn't have issued an ultimatum. Hannah laughed, a short, sharp sound. Most people would cave immediately, or sulk and withdraw. You, apparently, just play the game. Someone has to, I replied. We parted with a polite hug, the kind of hug that carried neither passion nor flirtation, just an acknowledgement of shared understanding. Yet, the mere act of being outside Emily's influence, of engaging with someone else in her world without guilt or shame, was empowering in a way I hadn't anticipated. Returning home that evening, I knew the storm waiting for me was inevitable. Emily was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, pacing like a caged animal. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, but beneath the anger there was panic. You actually went through with it, she said, voice trembling. With Hannah? Yes, I said simply. I did exactly what you asked. We met, we talked, we respected the boundaries. Emily's face twisted, a mixture of rage, disbelief, and desperation. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You're trying to humiliate me. I shook my head. I'm doing what you demanded. If you don't like the consequences of your decisions, you can't blame me for taking them seriously. Her lips quivered. But I didn't mean like this. You meant open, I said firmly. I'm honoring your definition of it. I didn't create the rules. You did. The room fell silent for a long time. She finally broke down, tears streaming, voice cracking. I just wanted, I don't know, a little freedom. I didn't think it would hurt like this. I didn't think you'd actually participate. And now you know, I said softly, though my heart ached. You know that freedom has consequences, and that actions have impact. That's life, Emily. You opened the door. You can't pick and choose who walks through. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it nervously. Then, as if the next step was inevitable, her brother Liam appeared on the screen. Taryn, what are you doing? He demanded, voice sharp with protective anger. Emily is in tears. You can't just go around dating her friends. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. I'm following her rules, Liam. She asked for an open relationship. She set the boundaries. I'm respecting them. There was a pause. Then Liam's voice hardened. You're being unreasonable. She didn't mean for it to be like this. And I didn't mean for her to issue an ultimatum, I replied evenly. We're both acting within the framework she created. If she wants to redefine it, she can do so directly. Until then, I'm operating within the rules. The conversation ended with Liam grumbling and hanging up, leaving me staring at the blank screen. The floodgates had opened. By Sunday afternoon, it wasn't just Emily and her brother. Her mother, Karen, became involved. The call started politely enough, but it didn't take long for the disapproval to pour out like a storm. I'm so disappointed in you, Taryn, Karen said, her voice dripping with condemnation. Emily is heartbroken. How could you flaunt other women in her face, especially her friends? I listened, letting her vent. When she paused, I said calmly, Emily made a choice. She demanded an open relationship or the wedding wouldn't happen. I agreed to her terms. I am respecting her stated wishes. If she regrets her decision, that's on her, not me. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then she huffed, muttering about my immaturity and vindictiveness. I let it roll off, knowing that no lecture would change the facts. Emily set the game in motion, and I was simply playing it honestly. Monday morning brought the inevitable confrontation. Emily was a storm of emotions. Tears, anger, pleading, accusations. She alternated between begging me to call off the open relationship and accusing me of planning this all along to escape the wedding. I stood my ground. Emily, I said firmly, we can end the open relationship if that's truly what you want. But understand this, your ultimatum changed everything. You were willing to risk years of our life together over a whim. I can't pretend that never happened. Trust is gone. That foundation is broken. Her shoulders slumped. So, what now? She whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. Now, we face the reality of your choices. And I can't marry someone who thinks it's acceptable to wield threats as a tool of control. The wedding is off. For a moment, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. Then it faded into a mixture of fury, disbelief, and sadness. She pleaded, promised she'd learned her lesson, tried to manipulate every emotion I had. Her brother tried again. Even her mother called my mother. But every attempt to sway me failed. I had reached the point where the truth mattered more than their theatrics. The fallout was as painful as it was inevitable. Emily's friendships fractured. Maya and Rachel kept their distance, though they were kind enough to be honest with me about the situation. Hannah, Tessa, and Isabel all maintained their boundaries, seeing the truth of what happened. Emily's manipulations had backfired spectacularly, leaving her isolated. For me, there was relief, oddly intertwined with sadness. Years of plans, hopes, and shared dreams dissolved, but in their place came clarity and self-respect. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't vengeful. I simply honored the reality she created and let natural consequences unfold. In the end, life moved forward. I focused on myself, my friends, and rebuilding a sense of normalcy. Emily moved out. Vendors were canceled. Accounts were split. Every small administrative task felt like a tiny reclamation of my life. And through it all, I realized something vital. Freedom has a price, honesty is non-negotiable, and no ultimatum is worth a lifetime of regret. Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.